Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the Robin's Nest, the Bristol City podcast with a slightly different twist today. Obviously, we're in a very different situation with the coronavirus. So I am here in my house without my co-presenter, Mikey, who's really not been very well. So lots of love to Mikey. Hopefully he'll be able to join us again soon. But I am connected via the wonders of the World Wide Web to our very special guest today. And that is Club Head of Performance, Aidy Rolls. Andy, hello.
Hello, I'm not sure I'm very special, but it's great to be here, and I hope everyone that's not very well gets better soon.
Andy, it's unprecedented times at the moment with COVID-19. The situation for the football club is obviously a very difficult one at the moment. At what point did you have to start making plans for this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Probably, and again, I've lost the track of times a little bit, but the Friday we ceased training. Probably a couple of days before that, you could tell this was escalating beyond football and things were going to change. But even that Thursday night, we still planned to play that Saturday. So the players came in on that Friday. It was going to be a normal Friday. And then things escalated very quickly and we got sent home that day with a view of not coming in for a week. So the players initially were given a little bit of gym equipment, some stuff to get on with. And then it's escalated again from then, obviously. So we've had to send out more gym equipment, fitness regimes, things to entertain them and to keep them fit, because at the minute we are still bubbling along without some definite time frames. So it's been a little bit tricky in terms of that. But the players have been good as gold. They've all worked hard, and we're in regular contact with them. A lot of us are in regular contact with them. So yeah, all good, really. As good as can be.
So take us through some of those fitness regimes. What sort of things will the lads be doing at the moment?
Yeah. Well, the first week, there was not the big shutdown. So they were going to the training ground in small groups and they were running. And they're doing 4-minute blocks and different things. Different players have got different specifics of what they need to do. They were touching their high-speed running, which is one of our really big performance indicators. If you train low and play high, it's a big problem for injury. So we try and make sure we hit those things. But then when the government bigger shutdown came on the Monday evening, we obviously had to change things drastically. So players had to train on their own. They're still allowed out for their exercise. So they have been going out, but on their own. You're not allowed to go out with anyone you don't live with, as we know. So we've been abiding with that. And they've been doing probably a little bit more gym-based. Now, there are some meetings happening this week, so timings might change. And depending on that, we probably are going to go into a period of download. We're expecting that perhaps the players might not get an inter-season break or an off-season. So we're thinking that the end of this season might roll into the end of the beginning of next season. So we are talking about working towards the players having a 2 weeks of not running, basically. They still would do their own individual stuff. They still do their own tendon loading, their own core. They would still do stuff, but we just want to offload them slightly, thinking they're not going to get another break.
How do you know that they are doing it? Are they recording it? Are they sending you videos? I mean, I'm not bringing into question any of our players' professionality, but how do you know it's all going on?
No, it's a good question. And at some clubs I've been at, I'd be very dubious that they're doing it. But here, they're young, enthusiastic, and generally good people, so I believe them. And secondly, they have monitors they have to download and we can see it, so they can't really get away with it. Unless they put it on their dog or their partner and make them do it, we know they're doing it. So they have to download it, send it to Paddy once a week. He downloads on his computer and he can see that they've all hit their max speed, the distances we want, the speeds they want. So we trust them, but we're also keeping a close eye on them.
Mental health is also a massive consideration, as some of the players will live alone. How are we coping as a club with those guys?
Yeah, it's interesting that. And we've tried not to focus on players and staff. We've tried to focus on everyone, because there's also a lot of members of staff that are living in relatively small flats and don't have family around them. So we've been trying to keep a close eye on them as well. There's a little group of us. There's myself, Matt Parsons, who's, I don't know his proper title, was a player liaison officer. Jill Holt and Andy Proctor as the physios, and Kevin Mincher as the performance coach. And we've been rotating, contacting them. I text them twice a week. Matt rings a group, Andy Proctor rings a group. It's a fine balance, really, because there's some of them, like Andy Vyman, that's with his family in the house, working hard, who's not enjoying this, but having a bit of time his family's never had before. And there will also be a young lad on their own in a flat who's finding it really difficult. So there's a fine balance, because some of them don't want to be called 4 times a week. Some of them do. We were going out for walks with different ones, but that's more difficult under the current guidelines. So we are keeping a close eye on everyone, but trying to get the balance right of not hassling them, really. They are grown men. They know we're here if they need anything. We're a very supportive club and staff. So we're just trying to keep a close eye without overdoing it.
Who's had the best chat recently on some of these calls? Who's a joy to speak to?
The best one, and it probably gets all the attention, Jamie Patterson's always quality. I don't tend to speak to him a lot, but he does send me some pictures I wouldn't want my 8-year-old seeing as well sometimes, So there's just stuff floating around on the different groups. I got sent something yesterday where the words of a song have been changed to the 80s, and it's probably the best thing I've seen forever. I sent it out to a couple of players, realised they weren't even born when the 80s was happening, so it was a waste of time. So I then sent it to Mark Ashton and a couple of the coaches, and it got a much more positive vibe. So again, there's lots of stuff going on. The players have done a quiz. They've got their own group. The players, they've got lots of stuff with technology. They're in contact that. They've got all sorts of films. They've got activities. There's a couple of them we're keeping a closer eye on, but the players actually have been so far, and I do believe we're in the early midst of this, so things could change, but we're as good as can be at the moment. We've got nothing to moan about considering what certain populations are going through.
Are there levels of WhatsApp groups? On this podcast, we've talked about there being like a players WhatsApp group, and then there's one with the gaffer in, one without the gaffer in. Is it same for the staff? Is it same for the coaching staff? Do you have various levels of WhatsApp groups you're in?
Yeah, there are. There's a performance group, which is the physio sports science, which 90% of it is work related and mundane. And then there's just the odd little glimpse of happiness where someone puts something on. There's more one with the doctor and ourselves, and there's a bit more random stuff gets put on that. There's quite a serious one at the minute, which Mark Ashton's heading, which is all his senior staff, and that's very much work. But then that same group have got another group where we put up some other different things. I put the 1980s thing on yesterday. So there are different groups, and you have to pick the right group for the right information, which can be a problem at times.
I bet, yeah. Don't post in the wrong group, guys.
No, exactly.
How difficult is it for you at the moment, personally? Because obviously your routine has changed and your sort of situation. But on a sort of a lighter note, again, getting to spend a little bit more time with the family because they're still based in London, aren't they?
Yeah, we're based in a village outside London, so we're very, very lucky. We've got a nice garden. We're able to go out and play. We exercise the dog together. So no, I'm very aware that there's a big cloud hanging over the country, and everyone's trying to do their bit for that. And I'm keeping guidelines and doing my business. I'm still getting up. My 8-year-old boy Albert wakes up every morning at 6 o'clock. So I'm still up at 6 o'clock and trying to watch a bit of news and doing a few bits and bobs with him. And then about 8 o'clock, well, this morning I've been for a run just to get my day going. And then I will probably work at this desk, which I've set up in my lounge. So Albert, my son's doing his schoolwork over there. And then I'm sat here. So I probably work in the morning, sort of 8 o'clock till 2-ish, doing bits, keeping in contact. There's always stuff to do. And then from 2, Albert's schooling sort of stops, and we do go in the garden, kick a ball about, cook some tea, watch a bit of telly, play some iPad, just have a bit more family time, which is nice. And then probably the text message. In football, things tend to be morning and evening. The afternoons are often quiet. So we tend to work in the mornings. Everyone's on it, do their bits. And then around 5, 6 o'clock again, we tend to touch base with people and things happen again, normally preparing the next day or something like that. But no, I've got to be honest. I'm aware there's a big black cloud, but I have enjoyed having some time with my wife and son, and we've done some quite fun things. We played Monopoly yesterday for an hour, and I got absolutely thrashed by both of them. So we have to try and make the most of these things.
For sure. One of the things that I can see on the video, so if you're listening to this as an audio podcast, we're also able to see each other at the moment. Rolsey, you've got some facial hair coming along there, I've seen. Is this on purpose?
I suppose it is on purpose. I've never grown a beard, and I often give people beards a little bit of stick and not looking after themselves. But I just thought if I'm ever going to grow one, this is probably the time to do it. So I haven't shaved since being off work, which is 3 weeks, and I am still going through the very itchy phase, and I'm not sure how long it will stay with, but I'm going to give it a little bit longer and see what happens.
Yeah, you've got to give that itchy stage about a week. Once you've got through that itchy stage, you can accelerate on and grow that. But I'd love to see you with a beard, Rolsey. I think it'd suit you, mate.
I think this is my one-off chance. So yeah, I'm going to stick with it for now. Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about you, a man with an incredible CV. I'm just looking down the list of some of the managers you've worked for here, and Ranieri, Mourinho, Arsene Wenger, to name but 3 of the star-studded list of managers and clubs you've worked at. Take us back to day dot. How did Andy Rolls get into football?
Well, I qualified as a physiotherapist, and I worked in the NHS at Charing Cross and Hammersmith hospitals. And I'd like to give a shout out to the amazing work that I know they'll be doing at this moment in time. So I'm NHS based. I love my time there. The teamwork was fantastic. And then I did some work in the NHS for an A&E consultant called Hugh Millington. And we are talking 20-ish odd years ago. And then these things called academies come along, and they were looking for a physiotherapist to do Tuesday, Thursday nights where these academies were starting. I offered to do that free of charge to begin with, because I thought it'd be exciting and interesting. And then it just escalated from there, really. But Chelsea back then was a very different club to now. There was a Hugh Millington, the doctor, came in on a Tuesday and Thursday morning. We had to be out of the training ground every Wednesday because the college were coming in. We rented off Imperial College. There was 2 physios, me and Mike Banks, 2 masseurs, and a kit man. And that was basically it. And then Ranieri came in after Vialli. So we had Ken Bates was the chairman then, and every pound was a prisoner. It was a really small club. Got to a cup final. We were doing well, but then all of a sudden the money came in and the club just expanded. And all of a sudden this small medical team of me and Mike and a couple of masseurs and an older man called George Price, who was a great fella, just couldn't cope with the demands of the new footballer. And then things quickly escalated from there into becoming what we probably know as a more modern football club then.
So tell us a little bit about how you ended up coming to City, because there was Chelsea, Watford, West Ham, Arsenal, of course, and then to City. So talk us through a little bit about your route through the clubs to Bristol City.
Yeah, I've been very lucky, and a lot of people have looked after me, and things happen in football for a reason. I tend to do 5 years, it seems to be, at most clubs. I was at Chelsea, did a year with Mourinho. We had a great year. We won the Premier League that year, and it was fantastic. And then a new doctor came in, and the regime changed. And then I went to Watford, where I first met Mark Ashton. We had 5 really good years there. We got promoted. Unfortunately, got relegated, got an FA Cup semi-final. But it was just the beginnings of something really good. I got on well with Mark, and then Mark left and things didn't go so well. And you sort of get a feeling when it's the right time to leave. And I would say something I've always been lucky at, or had a bit of a sense at, is the good time to leave. And then I went to West Ham with Steve Clarke and Franco Zola, which I knew as players at Chelsea. They were looking for someone, so they asked me if I want to come in there. And I learned loads at West Ham, and I was there for 5 years. Sam Allardyce, Avram Grant, they were great times. We had a playoff final, but it was a difficult club, and I found the politics of it. And I was younger then and probably didn't manage up as well as I do now, and I found it difficult. I got quite stressed, and I just needed a change. So instead of having the role I have now, where I manage a lot of people, I went to Arsenal just to be a physiotherapist. I just wanted that change to get back to caring about a player rather than caring about politics and all those other things. Had 5 great years at Arsenal, looking after a group of 6 players. I tend to look after the French lads, and Jack Wilshere was the sort of the banter around it, because that was my group of players. I'd worked with a lot of French players before, so I've always got on well with them. And then Colin Lewin, my boss, got the sack at Arsenal. I didn't want to work for the new boss they were bringing in. at that stage, Mark Ashton rung me and asked me. I'd made a mistake of saying to Mark a few years ago, I felt I had one more go in me, one more exciting sort of project. So he rung me up and said, I've got that one more exciting project for you. What do you think? And initially I wasn't sure. It was a long way away. And then I came down to Bristol, fell in love with the opportunity, fell in love with the excitement, met the manager, and was really excited by it, and had a great, nearly two years there now. So yeah, that was sort of the story of how I got there. It was, just these things happen at the right time for a certain reason.
And as you mentioned, quite a few trophies on the way. Winning the Premier League must be a huge achievement that you have some great memories of.
Yeah, it was a fantastic time. I was quite young then, which some people find impossible to believe. But I also knew John Terry had come up through the academy at Chelsea, Jody Morris. We'd had a great group of people that we had a lot of fun with, and we were there at the old Chelsea before it went to the new Chelsea. So that was sort of a great ending to that period, really. And working for Jose Mourinho, he was then very young, very different, very exciting. So I learned an awful lot just from being around him, and his staff and how he did things. And so no, it was great. And I'll never forget the Sunday morning bus tour around the streets of King's Road and stuff like that. They were very special times. Yeah, they were good.
Do you have a place in your house where you keep all of these medals and these memories?
I have a stairwell. So I'm probably not great at that sort of thing, but I do have some special shirts which I've kept for people and some photos. So I have a stairwell, has a few shirts on it. I've got Marcel Desailly's last ever French shirt, which is quite special to me. I did a lot of work with him at the time. He'd be one of my favourite players I've worked with and watched play. I thought he was fantastic centre back and centre midfielder. He's obviously won the World Cup, so he's quite a special character. And he was just great to be around because he was so casual and so calm. And often I'm not sure he knew who we were playing. He just did his job. He was brilliant. So I've got some shirts on the stairwell. Then in a little small bedroom upstairs, I've got a few photos which are signed to me, thanking me for different bits and bobs. Jack Wilshere, Neil Sullivan, Rob Hoof. Just different things which are quite nice to keep. My son, who's 8, couldn't give a monkeys about it, but he might do at some point. So yeah, I keep a few bits and bobs like that.
And in terms of your career so far, are there one or two standout moments? And I don't necessarily mean, winning the silverware, but, have you had any fantastic tips, either football tips or life tips from these iconic characters that you've worked with along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I haven't thought of any offhand. The time at Watford when we had the lowest budget and were the favourites by the bookies to get relegated and we got promoted was obviously really, really special. And that taught me a lot about what you can achieve if you're all totally pulling in the same direction. So that was a really special period. I think Jack Collison, who was a young player, up and coming Welsh international at West Ham, smashing fella, lost his father in a motorbike accident, had a terrible knee injury, and the time he got back to play at Arsenal at the Emirates, I was the West Ham run-on physio, and he scored a goal to put us 1-0 up, and he came running over to me, and we had a massive cuddle, and I've got a photo of it. It almost brings a lump now just thinking what he's been through and how much time we spent. We must have spent 1.5 years trying to rehab his knee, and then for him to make it back and score at the Emirates was really special, to be fair. And that he just taught me an awful lot about just continuing and just trying. And something I say now to Albert, I don't really care if he's good at anything or not good at anything, as long as he tries his best. And that's sort of one of my ethoses about being a footballer. I don't really mind how good you are, as long as every Saturday you give your best and every day you give your best. I think that's all you can do in football and in life, really, is try every morning to do whatever you want to do as well as you can.
Along with those memories, Rolsey, I know you love a bit of banter. Have you got some fantastic bantery stories that you can tell on a public broadcast?
Yeah, there's loads of banter and there's loads of good people. There's some stuff in the early days at Chelsea where Nico, as a goalkeeper coach, can throw him downstairs and land on his knees. He's now an agent. He won't mind me telling this story, but you'd be at a nightclub or just at the training ground, and all of a sudden he would just throw himself down the stairs and land on his knees. And I was his physio going, "What are you doing? You're a young goalkeeper." But the days were different then. Things were more light-hearted. No one, like now, we'd go mad about it, but then we just sort of laughed about it and just thought it was normal. Billy, the masseur at Chelsea, is a great character. He was been at England, he's been at Scotland. He's a fantastic manual therapist. Got a brand new Range Rover, and it snowed, and John Terry and Frank Lampard built a snowman on his seat. Thought it was brilliant. And obviously, as it melted, all the electrics in the car broke and didn't work. So there were things like that. And, you know, Billy's got lots of them around them because they were doing running and sliding in the mud. And Billy did it and fractured his hip doing it. And then me and Mike, the physio, looking out the window, and everyone's saying, come and help, come and help. And we go, no chance, we're not correct. We thought we were just going to get put in the mud. So poor Billy's out there in the mud for about 10 minutes with a fractured hip, and we were going nowhere near him. So it's just things like that, I suppose, now. Obviously, Sam Allardyce is very famous for his nights out. We've had some good nights out. Went to Dubai with Sam on a training camp and didn't kick a football for 6 days. That also taught me a lot because we told the players we were going to train. We had the data for the games, the 6 games before, and the data for the 6 games afterwards. So I was saying to Sam, we have to train. We have to train. We can't have 6 days off. And he kept saying, Rosie, shut up. Trust me. We will run more. So he took them there and he told them, this is a holiday. Don't get in trouble. And we have to meet every morning at 9 o'clock. We have a run. We play head tennis. The rest of the day is yours. And the players had a great holiday. We came back and our running stats were up and everyone did well. And he also says things like, you have Christmas Day off, but don't let me down. If you don't prepare well and do well on Boxing Day, you will get punished later down the road. So like this year, the gaffer decided to give the players Christmas Day off. And I think it's things like that sometimes science does have to go out the window and a bit of common sense and a bit of man management come into it. I learned a lot from Sam about it's not always about the science. It's about doing the right thing and rewarding different people and stuff like that. So yeah, there's been some good stories. Yeah.
It's very interesting looking into your world now. So explain to us a little bit about where everything fits in. So you obviously have a relationship with the gaffer, and then you have your team. So can you take us through that side of things and how that all works in the coaching staff?
Well, 80% of my job is based at the training ground. Every morning I meet Aidy Proctor at 7:30 and we sit at our desk and go through the day as we see it. Then Paddy comes in and we get things set up. Then we will meet all the performance stuff. So I would take a list of the squad of players. Got one just here. So this sort of sheet here of all the players on, we would go through them all as a performance team. Everyone from the masseurs, the doctor, the nutritionist, Paddy from a sports science point of view, Dell from an S&C. We would discuss every player. Is everyone happy for them to do all the training? Then I would go and meet the manager at 8:30 and we'd go through the players again. I would tell him who is a red and can't train and update him on the injuries, who's a yellow and needs a bit of discussion. And we will have, and that could be quite a heated discussion at times. We might not agree on everything, but from there we come up with a plan from the day. And we have a suggestion of how far I want the players to run, and that can take somewhere between 20 minutes and an hour, that meeting, to get everything sorted. The players then start arriving at the training ground and they have to fill out a form which says how they feel, their stiffness. We might be doing some testing on them. So every 2 days after every game, we do some testing on them, gives us some objective data of where they are. Then I will get that and go around those players. At this stage, Aidy Proctor, the masseurs, Jill will be activating, looking at the injured players, getting the day off and running. Then I'll go back to the manager, perhaps with a fatigue test, and say, look, he was a yellow, but he's reporting he's got a problem. We've seen his hamstring strength down. I think we should adapt that more. So there's probably a second little alteration of training. Then the players will activate at 10 o'clock to train at 10:30. Then me and Aidy Proctor will cover training. Jill and the masseurs will stay with the injured players. The injured players will come in a bit later. They'll go in the treatment room and there'll be a board for them. Their day will all be set out. They've got 45 minutes with this. They've got 45 minutes. Then they're off to the pool. Then they're back for that. The injured players do work hard, not just to inconvenience them, but you can't have fit players seeing it's easier to be injured than it is to be fit. So the injured players do have a harder time. They have a longer day, and they probably do more work than a training player, sort of. It's not quite as physically hard, but it's different. And then at the end of the day, players sort of drift off between 2:30 and 3, and we probably sit down at the desk, have a cup of tea, the whole performance team, and just have a bit of a catch up on how the day's been, how it's gone, make sure everyone's aware of everything. And then everyone will prepare for the next day, and they start drifting off home sort of between 4 and 5.
It's it's a full-on day. I think people think that footballers sort of start training at whatever time in the morning and they're home by midday, but it's slightly more. It's actually a full-on profession now, isn't it, Andy? And the sort of measures that go into it and the margins, about how small things can make such a big difference. You must have seen the industry change a huge amount in your career.
Yeah, if I talk about Chelsea 20 years ago, before the money came in, players would come in at 10 o'clock. They would train at 10:30. If they didn't have any problems, they would probably be gone by 11:30, 12. There'd be a bit of lunch upstairs, but even in the early Chelsea days, there wasn't particularly lunch upstairs. And it was a different sport then. The distance, you could say it was more football. The distances they ran weren't the same, but it was more of a football than they weren't as athletic. It was different. Now they have to run such extreme distances and speeds, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. They have to be more scientific about it. So our players are in at 9:15. Some of them do the school run and then come in. Some are in earlier than that if they have individual specific things they want to do. And then we train activate at 10 o'clock, train 10:30. It's normally an hour and a half. That takes them to 12. They then got gym afterwards, which is 1. Then they've got lunch. So there's probably no one's leaving much before 2, half 2. Now, you can argue that's not a 9 to 5 job, but it is 6 days a week. They don't get any weekends and whatever. And if you're injured, it's probably even longer than that. And the things we measure, hamstring strength, groin strength, to see how they're progressing for the week, who's getting fatigue. If you'd mentioned that 10 years ago, everyone thought you're mad. Everyone said you can't do it. Even when we went into Arsenal and we started doing this, it was initially met with, it's ridiculous. It's never going to work. And Colin was very open-minded, my boss then, and wanted to try Arsene Wenger. Initially, probably wasn't interested in it, but by the end of it, was quite interested in the results and wanted it done. So, yeah, it's changed an awful lot, really, over the last, 20 years, certainly. But even over the last 7 or 8 years, it's changed an awful lot.
You talk about Arsene Wenger there. Let's just explore him a little. What was your relationship with him like?
Yeah, it was great. I didn't do the morning routine with him like I do with our gaffer, like Colin did that. I had my group of 6 players, but he very much would come round and chat to everyone every morning. And, the coronavirus has probably stopped it, but he would shake everyone's hand every morning. He was a man of routine. He was in the same time. Would come back from a European game and he would stay at the training ground and watch the game back. He was an absolute football workaholic. He loved it. I really tried never to talk to him about football. I had to treat his elbow a few times. I talked about the Six Nations a lot. He loved his rugby. We had the French national rugby team come in and have lunch with us once. So everyone wanted to talk football with him. And he doesn't want to talk football with me. So I would always talk about rugby with him. His daughter was trained to be a vet. My wife's is a horse physio. So I would try and engage him on different things. He was obviously a very, very interesting man and very loyal to his staff. And yeah, just like a good person, really.
And there's other big names on that CV as well. Let's take current gaffer out of the equation. Do you have a favourite manager of the past ones you've worked with?
Yeah, I probably do. And it's probably an obvious one. Aidy Boothroyd was the one that gave me my big chance, really, to become a head of a department and to teach me so much. And he's very into man management and books. The books he and his advisor, Keith Mincher, gave me to read and the stuff. He was so fair. If you did something right, he would tell you. But you knew you had to keep doing it. If you slipped it off it once or you were a bit late or so. I remember once coming back from a game at Derby with 1-2-1 and we had to leave the stuff in the gym then because we couldn't get into the training grounds. We rented it off the college. And then the next morning, me and Martin Pert, the sports scientist, who's now a coach at Man United, we came in at about 7:30 to clear it away. He probably had 4 or 5 hours sleep, if that. And he would already been in half an hour. And he was like, "What are you doing? This is sloppy. This has to be put away." And at the time, I thought, that's ridiculous. I'm exhausted. But looking back now, he was really good on those standards. And I can sometimes see my staff thinking, why is he getting cross about that little thing? But it's sometimes the little things that really drive me mad more than the big things. So yeah, Aidy would be right up there in terms of my development and me as a person as much as anything.
And of course, everything that you do at that training ground up at Fayland then results in a match day. And we're all missing that buzz of Ashton Gate on a Saturday afternoon. How are you coping without match days, Rolsey?
Do you know what? And I want to be as honest as I can on here. I sort of hate match days because
Do you really?
until they're finished, and the whole week builds up to it. And if you get an injury and if you lose, so there's part of me, I do miss it. 'Cause if you win, it's fantastic. But I sort of also think match days aren't my work. There's nothing I can do really on match day. I make sure the food's out for pre-match at home games. Matt Parsons does it for away games. And then I'm sort of finished. So I do sort of sit on match day thinking, okay, there's nothing more I can do. I've got to try and relax. But then often for 2 hours, I'm just wandering around like a loose end. I just look glad when they're over and you've won, and then you've got the Sunday off so much better, and then it all starts again. So I know lots of people love football, and obviously there's a bit of me that does, but I'm not sure I love match days.
What about those away games? Do you follow those?
Similar. He's probably his work doesn't on match days. Probably he's limited in what he can do. So often him and me end up just having a conversation about absolute rubbish, just trying to fill half an hour because there's just a lot of hanging around.
I guess when you live it and you breathe it and it is your life like it is for you, actually those results can make such a huge difference. Even in my tiny little role, if we lose, then it just makes the next day so much harder and for that sort of situation. So for you guys, it must be amplified 1,000 times.
It does. And obviously the gaffer gets, very emotional. He works hard all week, and when his plans don't go to plan, and I suppose my job is, I'm a little bit detached from the actual football. I'm sit between the football and other stuff. So is to make sure we try and keep doing the right things. And when you lose, you haven't done everything wrong. And when you win, you haven't done everything right. So I think, and also because I've been in it quite a long time, I'm probably a little bit of a voice of reason of, look, these things do happen. We've got to move on. And I'm very good at trying to make sure on the Monday morning, if we've won or lost, I'm the same. My banter's still terrible. I'm still saying the same old rubbish things. I'm still bringing the same old sheets. I really do pride myself on trying to be results don't affect me. And they do massively, but I try and just do the same thing because I think other people that are more emotionally involved, they can do that. So I try and just make sure all my staff do the same things on the right day.
And those away games, do you follow on the stream? Do you listen on the radio? Do you hide?
Yeah, the first year I was probably a bit better at it. I didn't watch them all, but the season we're in at the moment, I haven't missed any. I watched them all. So my Saturday, if they're away, on a Friday, the bus will pull out at 1:30, 2 o'clock. I will stay there and do all sorts of work that I probably can't do as other people around, looking at some money, looking at budgets with Jill, perhaps something like that. So I get quite a lot of work done that you can't do the rest of the time. Saturday morning, I'll come in and help treat the injured players. That's only my really physio day where I actually still do some physio, which I quite like. So me and Alan, the academy physio, would tend to run Saturday mornings. And then I will head home after that and get home. And as soon as I get in, my wife says, just will stay at work because I'll put the game on away at Derby or wherever it is. My boy will sit there quietly and watch that with me. And that can change my mood drastically, as we just spoke about. And then the weekend can start. Andy Proctor rings me afterwards. My idea of not doing away games, I have been to a few this year, is to try and just stay detached and try just to not get too up in the Saturday. My job is to try and see the bigger picture. It's not always easy, but that is the idea of it, and that's how Mark and me planned it. And it works quite well. And like I said, I don't do much on home games, so I would do even less on away games. So yeah, it certainly doesn't detrimental in any way.
One of the most exciting things at the moment is the new training ground, which is, going up at quite some speed as I pass it to come to work. How exciting is that for you, and how will it change training at Phelan?
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's one of the reasons why I came, and one of the reasons a lot of the players came is this thing. Sam and Gary have worked their socks off on it. They've really lived it, and the speed it's going up at's amazing. And they're in there working at 7 in the morning until 8 at night. The staff, the building staff, the construction staff have been amazing. It would change things massively, because at the minute we have to be out of the canteen at 7:45. So if the gaffer or Kevin, the performance coach, or the medical team want to do a meeting, you're stuck for time a little bit. So it would just make that whole learning environment easier. We've got classrooms, we've got debrief rooms. You haven't got to book that off the school. And the school are excellent, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to get everything into one day. As we talked about earlier, we have to concertina the whole day. Just to allow a little bit more flexibility in the day will be massive. And then things like the swimming pool for recovery, for rehab. Now, again, we use David Lloyd down the bottom of the hill, which are great, but it's different. It's not ours. You can't do exactly what you want in there. So from a performance point of view, it would be a massive step forward.
The situation with having your own place and having, I guess, a hand in the design, when you were going through those plans, to be able to have an input of that must have been very satisfying for you.
Yeah, it was excellent. Really enjoyed it. And like I said, Sam Morse has been great. And he makes me think about things. So what about that? What about that? I'm like, oh, leave me alone. I'm done. Stop thinking about it. But even just the other week, we're talking about the staff in seating. I'm a bit worried about how we sit, because we all sit in one room, and the relationships I have with certain staff is because of how we sit. And I want to maintain that in the new environment. So I'm trying to work that out at the moment with Sam. And then Jill just came over and said, oh, what about just doing that? Oh, yeah, it's easy. So it's revolving all the time at the moment. I think it will get to a stage. We're probably getting near where we have to say, that's it now. Nothing else changes. Because the more you look at it, the more you can tinker with it. There's stuff in there like iPads where the players can come in. At the minute, they have to do it on their phones, but there'll be iPads as they come in. They can enter their data. There's a special testing room. At the minute, we have to change the gym into a testing room on certain mornings. So that will all get set up in there, so we can quickly test players if we need to, rather than it being a big ordeal. So no, the actual way it will make us work will be fantastic, really. Yeah, it will make a massive difference.
And what's the timeline? When will you hope to be sat in your new office, Rolsey?
Well, that's a good one. I don't know how it's been affected by recent events, but I was trying to push and was hassling them for Christmas. And there was even some talk about perhaps October international break. And I've got to be honest, I'm not on top of that now. I know Sam and Gary would be. So I actually think if we could get moved in provisionally next season, because who knows when that's going to start, but I'd like to think we'll be in by this time next year, but I don't know any more than that, really.
Yeah, I guess timelines are all a bit screwy at the moment. So unfair question from me, probably.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. I just don't want to give any false hope. So the answer I should say is I don't know.
From your point of view, you talked about it still enjoying, being on the tools as such and actually getting involved in a bit of physio work. Is there some satisfaction then on seeing that recovery process and actually, you physically being able to make someone better?
Yeah, I do like that. I probably do miss that. And probably what I miss the most is the planning of it. I like taking an injury. And the last one I probably did was Hakeem when I first come. He had an ankle operation. So I sat down, got the surgeon's guidelines, and I sat down and worked out what I wanted him to do at different points. I looked back at the other injuries I had that were similar and sort of compared it, and you are on him running at 9 weeks, and worked back to what he had to set. And I really enjoyed that process. And then I took him through it and did his manual therapy, and then he got back. So that was probably the last one that I did that much detail in. I still do more. So Andy and Jill would do the majority of the treatment of that, and we discuss it loads, and I'll be a pain in the neck and poke my nose in where they don't really want it. But so I still do lots of stuff like that, but it's more ideas. But yeah, I think there's nothing better than taking a tendon. Like, Thomas Callis had a problem with his tendon this year. They can be an absolute nuisance. They can take a long time to respond. They don't heal quickly like a muscle would. They take a long time. It can just be a very laborious process. So when Andy sits down and writes that process out, that's the bit I like, and that's what I like to see, and I like to probably interfere with a bit. So that they can move forward. So yeah, I still do like to be involved in it. I still see myself as a physiotherapist, although I probably, Mark Ashton would say that's not my job now. My job is much bigger, about bigger things than that. But I do like to keep involved with it. And obviously I'm still the link between the performance staff and the manager. So it's important that I'm still abreast of everything that's going on every morning, really.
So take us through someone like Corey, who was out for a long time with his injury. From the moment that happens to him getting back onto the pitch, your involvement is overseeing, or take us through how that works.
Well, if we take his ankle, he got injured at Reading last Easter, and everyone could see as he came off, it was serious, and Corey's not going to stay down if it's not serious. Then Jill took him to hospital. We did x-rays. He had a couple of fractured bones in there. And more importantly, had this ligament injury called Liz Frank's ligament. It sits between lots of the carpal bones and covers them and gives the foot stability. And if that gets ripped open, often you can, if you didn't have the fractures, after 6 weeks, you can be back running. But as soon as he started twisting and turning, he'll get pain and won't be able to progress. Jill tends to take the longer term injuries because she doesn't travel. So Andy travels away. So he tends to do the shorter term ones or the maintenance ones, like the callus tendons. So Jill, then we took him up to London to see a specialist. We were fearing he'd need an operation. Unfortunately, he did. He then has an operation to fix the bones and probably more importantly, to fix the ligament. And the surgeon would then give us a time frame of what he thinks the healing will be. Now, surgeons are very good at that, but they tend to think that 0 to 6 weeks in plaster, 6 weeks to 8 weeks doing this, then they can run. And it's our job to put into that and liaise with the player that it's not that simple. There's many steps you have to tick off before you can run. So we would set in that process, me and Jill, some objective markers. One of the things I'm probably pretty obsessed about is I would say to Jill, before he runs, what in your opinion has he got to do? She would say, I want his calf strength to be this and this. I want his balance to be this and this, his jump height to be this. And then we would try and say to the Corey, look, the surgeon said this, and that's fine. But until you've done these markers, you can't run. And the players like that because it gives them something to aim for. So I try and take it away from time frame more towards objectivity. The two do go together, but they have to, you can't just rely on time frames. And then basically it's just a case of Corey getting through the work, which he does brilliantly. The first period we probably leave him based at home because he's in a boot or he's in plaster. We might give him a complex and a few, get him in occasionally, but you're looking at a 6 to 9 month process. So if you go getting him in all the time early, what are you going to do the next 6 weeks or whatever? So initially we're just a little bit relaxed, leave things alone, don't get too busy, let things heal. And then as it progresses, the work gets more and more and more. Until the end, Andy tends to take the pitch rehab. Andy's really good at that and really enjoys that. So then Jill will hand over to Andy and Paddy, do this pitch specific rehab, and then we gradually introduce them to training.
And then that moment comes when they run out on a match day. And how does that make you feel personally, having been personally responsible partly for their rehab?
Yeah, it's great. And Jill, I know Jill, they spent hours together, so she'd have got a massive buzz out of it. But again, there's a nervousness associated around it, like match day. Like, is he ready? He might have played, I can't remember offhand if he played 2 or 3 under 23 games, but they're very different. And the step from them to a foot starting a championship game is different, whatever you do. So Corey went in and did brilliantly. And then the next problem is he's played Saturday, so the gaffer wants him Tuesday and wants him Saturday. So the next man, and you get that, of course he does. He's a very good player, one of our key lads. So then the job is to try and control the gaffer. And gaffer, look, out of those 4 games we've got coming, I'm thinking you might need to pick 3 of them. I can't see him doing all that. He's been out for probably 1.5 years or 9 months with this, So it's just trying to manage that expectation. I think also the injured players like Corey have been out for a long time. You see they do brilliantly initially with adrenaline, gets them through the fitness. Then it always tends to be a little drop off. If you see an ACL, so they come back in, they've been looking forward to it, everything gets them through it. And then it always tends to be a little drop off in performance or athletic ability where it all catches up on them a little bit, and then they go again, really. So you see this, they do brilliantly first, then there's a little drop and everyone's not sure, and then they go again. And that's not Corey. That's, in my opinion, all long-term injuries tend to have that pattern.
From a physio's point of view, with your physio's hat on, for footballers out there, whether they be semi-professional, whether they be amateur, whether they just kick about on a Sunday, are there things we can do in our prep for those sorts of games that will help prevent injuries? Do you have any advice for footballers listening?
Yeah, it's really simple, and it used to be argued about, and people wouldn't agree with it, and the foreign managers wouldn't agree with it, and even now, some foreign managers don't like the gym. But it's pretty categorically proven now that if you are stronger, you are less likely to get injured. Now, some people will still argue about that, but the evidence and the science pretty much support that stronger players get injured less. So my thing for Sunday morning or Saturday semi-professional footballers is get strong, whether that's squatting, deadlifting, hamstring, Nordic exercises, RDLs, whatever it is, probably is a little bit determined by what apparatus, what equipment, what stuff you've got around you. But get strong and stay strong, especially if you're a quick athlete. If you are a winger that is a sprinter, you have to be strong or you will tear your hamstrings.
Great advice. Thanks, Rosie. You have this wonderful CV, 11 managers, some amazing clubs. What's left? What's missing?
I've not been shy in saying this. I want to get Bristol City into the Premier League. That's what I've come here to do. I certainly want to get us in the playoffs this year, and I want to get us promoted. That's what I'm here to do. I don't know if it's true or not, but I say this to a lot of people in a bantery way. Those that know again, I want to be the first member of staff to get 3 different teams promoted through the playoffs into the Premier League. Now, if we got automatic, that would be brilliant. And whether I am the first to get 3, I'm probably not. But I say that out there so that everyone knows that is our aim, my aim, and therefore the aim of the staff that I work with. We want to get promoted. And we were 7th, I think, when the season was interrupted. Which is not a million miles off where we want to be, but there's still some work to go. So we are still a bit of a coiled spring, just waiting to know what's going to happen next, really, the same as everyone is. But yeah, that I want to do that. And then I suppose after that, the next challenge I would set myself is making sure we stayed up there. And one of our challenges is to become a sustainable Premier League club. And I want to be part of that, really.
Well, fantastic aim, and I think we're all behind you there. Do you have any specific fantastic memories from your time so far at Bristol City? What's been the highlight so far? Hopefully another highlight to come as you talk about the Premier League, but what's been the best bit so far for you?
If I talk football, I went away to sit in the away end with the away fans at Sheffield United last year. I went up on the Friday night, stayed at the hotel, and then the Saturday got out of the way so players didn't see me because I'm not normally there. I went and sat in a pub, had a pint, had a pie and a bowl of chips, and then I went in the away end and watched us win 3-2. And on that day, I did probably have a tear in my eye because I genuinely believe with that result we would push on and get in the playoffs. I thought we were magnificent that day. I'm not great at remembering games. I think we went 1-0 down. I think a lot of teams away at Bramall Lane could have wilted. We didn't. We came back to win 3-2, and that was an absolute highlight from a football point of view. I thought that was great. The fans were amazing that day, I've got to say. The away fans were absolutely brilliant. So yeah, that's a definite highlight. And I think the other highlights have been seeing how things have come since I've got here, of bringing people together. So I don't want to be big-headed, but I feel before I come here, a lot of people were trying really, really hard, but were in different places and doing different things. And I've really enjoyed bringing things together with Matt Parsons' help, with Luke, with Mark Ashton, everyone in the office at the stadium, then the gaffer, the assistant managers, Sam Stanton, the physios. Just so my job is that, and I've really enjoyed that. And when I look back now, if it all finished today and I left Bristol City tomorrow, whatever happened, I would really see that as something I have helped improve, and it still needs to get better again. but I really enjoyed that. So that for me is a real positive and enjoyable experience. I think we're doing well.
Superb. A
A
very,
bit of a boring
very
answer that,
interesting
but
chat.
yeah.
No. I think, gosh, I learned things today that I didn't know, and I think so many people listening would have as well. A very interesting man, Rolsey. Stay safe. Continue with the beard.
Would you mind awfully if I've obviously worked 5 years in the NHS, and I don't want to get emotional, but I think the work they are doing at the minute, and I know they'll be absolutely up against the wall, and I just want, from me and my family and everyone at Bristol City, to say thank you so much for everything they're doing.
Of course, and we echo
Thank you.
those thoughts as well. Andy Rolls, our head of performance, thank you very much for being on our podcast. Of course, the advice from Bristol City, as ever, is to stay inside, stay 2 meters away from anybody. If you do have to go outside, it has to be for medical supplies, for food, or for essential working if you can't work from home. Otherwise, please stay inside and please protect our NHS. As Andy has just mentioned, of course, he was a previous NHS worker, and you saw how emotional he got there. It's really important that we stick to that advice. So thank you very much for listening. Episode 3, slightly different than the rest of the podcast, but who knows what will happen next. Stay tuned to our channels in the meantime. Thanks for listening.